loved old black and white photographs. Ever since the day my mother showed me the old photo albums of my grandparents. Those tiny images were like windows to a different time. A different world, even. With fascination, I marveled at the huge old farmhouse my family used to live in a century ago. And I laughed at my grandfather's grumpy face on his first day of school. As I grew older, I often found myself leafing through those old albums, taking in the memories they contained. So, it was only natural that I used old black and white photographs for an arts project at university. Our professor had thought it was a good idea to give us free rein over what we wanted to create, and so I decided on a collage of old photographs. For weeks, I gathered any and all old photographs I could find. My favorite place to indulge in these treasure hunts was my city's weekly flea market. The place was huge, and more reminiscent of a fair than a yard sale. I loved wandering from stall to stall, scanning all the things that were for sale. From the newest movies and games, to phones and clothes, to obscure tools and forgotten family memorabilia. You could find almost anything there. The stalls I came to stop at the most were those that sold old postcards and photographs. I didn't care so much for the postcards, but I'd look through every stack of old photographs to see if I'd be able to find something interesting. One Sunday morning, I stumbled upon a very peculiar photograph that stood out among the rest the old man at the stall was selling. The caption on the back was as simple as could be. Family in black and white. The backdrop of the photograph was an old farmhouse. In front of it, more than a dozen people had gathered, all there in a single line, standing next to one another, smiling brightly at the camera. Yet, as my eyes wandered from one to the other, I couldn't help but find those smiles a bit overdrawn, almost comically happy. There was something strangely intriguing about this supposed family, and the vibe it gave off made me buy it. I strolled the flea market for another hour, but I wouldn't find anything else of interest. The moment I arrived at home, I was quick to return to my work in progress. The enormous canvas was already half filled with different photographs. My eyes wandered over them before I pinned my newest treasure to a point near the center. I put it right next to a photograph of an elderly couple, and below a group of children playing out in the sun. I took a step back and nodded to myself. That place there in the center was more than fitting, I decided. For a moment, I was about to continue working on the collage, when I remembered I was supposed to meet up with a group of friends. So, after a quick lunch, I set out again. When I returned, it was already late evening, and I was more than tired. As I walked down the hallway of my small apartment, I stopped in front of the living room for a second. There, at the back, was the collage I'd wanted to work on, but I'd spent all day hanging out with friends. I sighed as I looked at it in the dim light of the hallway. As my eyes wandered from photograph to photograph, they came to rest on the newly added family in the center. As I stared at it from afar, I could have sworn I saw something. It was the smallest of movements, but it almost looked as if one of the people in the photograph had winked at me. As an icy feeling washed over me, I hit the living room light switch. Quick steps led me over to it, before I called myself an idiot and cursed at my imagination fueled by way too many horror movies. Just go to bed, you idiot, I mumbled to myself. Sunday came and went, and for the first time in a while, I made some actual progress on the collage. During the next week, however, there was no hope of working on it. Group projects and exam preparation already took out a sizable chunk of my time, but there was also my new part-time job. What little free time I had left, I spent in front of Netflix, catching up on the latest season of Snowpiercer. It was only on Friday, my only weekday off work, that I could finally get back to it. It was already late afternoon, and I could feel the toll the week had taken on me. So I prepared myself a strong, hot cup of coffee and began going through the stack of photographs I still wanted to add to the collage. Once I'd found a few, and I turned to the collage, a strange feeling washed over me. As I looked at it, I knew something about it was different. I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. At first, I thought one of the pinned photographs might have fallen down. But no. They were all still there, right where they belonged. Before long, my eyes found their way to the strange family at the center. This really was one extensive family, I thought. My eyes wandered from person to person before they came to rest on the youngest member of the family procession. A little boy standing in front of the rest. His smile seemed oddly different from the rest. It wasn't as comically overdrawn as the others. It was almost forced. My eyes wandered on to the photograph of the elderly couple next to it, and then to the boys playing in the field. Yet, that strange feeling was back. As I stared at it, I couldn't help but wonder if something was different about it. 3 boys playing in a field, I thought. Had there always been 3? Alright, stop it. You're acting silly. I scolded myself. Of course it's always been 3. It's not like a photograph can change. I shook my head and laughed at my silly, overactive imagination. After a deep sip of my coffee, I went back to sorting through the remaining photographs. I spent most of Friday evening working on the collage, and continued all the way through Saturday afternoon. That's when my friend Lizzy dragged me to some silly dorm party. At first, I wasn't in the mood to party, but the moment we arrived, I had to admit that I needed to unwind a little. After a few drinks, though, it wasn't just about unwinding anymore. Instead, it was about having a blast. We stayed at the dorm party for a while before Lizzy and I made our way into the city and went bar hopping. We hit one bar and then another, and when I was on my way home, I saw it was already early in the morning. When I woke up the next day, I felt terrible. Cursing at Lizzy, I lay in bed for almost another hour. The moment the world had stopped spinning, I got up to prepare myself some coffee. As I made my way down the hallway, I stopped for a moment. Something scratched at the back of my mind. The hint of a memory. I saw myself throwing open the front door of my apartment and almost crashing to the floor as I entered. As I stumbled down the hallway, I turned and looked at the collage. There was a single thought, a single idea. Where the hell are all the people? For a moment, I was confused, almost scared. Shit, someone had broken in and destroyed... No, they were all still there. As I stumbled toward it, I could see the smiling faces right away. No, not smiling. Grinning faces, I thought. And for the first time since I bought the photograph, it wasn't intriguing anymore. It was unnerving. I reached out my hand and unpinned the photograph. For a few seconds, I studied it, before I cursed and threw it to the floor. First, coffee. No use thinking about, well, anything right now. This hangover was killing me. For the rest of the day, which wasn't much considering I stumbled out of bed at 3 in the afternoon, I did nothing. I wasted away on the couch and cursed at myself for agreeing to hang out with Lizzy. Why had we even gone to that last bar? Why had I ordered all those shots? God, what had I been thinking? It was already evening when I started to feel like a normal human being again. As I prepared myself a cheap meal, I checked my planner. only to be reminded how busy this week would be. Instead of doing anything else, I settled in front of my laptop, put on another episode of my show, and ate dinner. It wasn't that late yet, but after last night, I knew I could use all the sleep I could get. I was woken up in the middle of the night. At first, I didn't know what was going on, but then I heard some strange noises. For a moment, I tried to ignore it, but then I couldn't help but listen. I hit the light switch and got out my phone. It was 2 in the goddamn morning. What was even going on? As I listened, though, my anger was replaced by worry. Where were those noises coming from? It sounded almost as if they were coming from inside my apartment. As quietly as possible, I slipped out from under my blanket before I tiptoed towards the bedroom door and listened. Once more, I could hear it. It was the sound of footsteps. Quiet, soft footsteps. It was over as quickly as it had started, but it was enough to scare me. Clutching onto my phone, I continued listening, but all was quiet. Finally, I opened the door inch by inch, trying my hardest to not make any noise. For a moment, I stared at the darkness ahead, waiting to see movement out there. But all was still. When I hit the light switch, all was normal. There was no hint of any intruder. The front door was still locked, and nothing was amiss. For the next few minutes, I checked every single spot in my entire apartment, but I found nothing out of the ordinary. As I made my way back to the bedroom, I cursed myself about whatever neighbor must have caused the noise that woke me up. Whatever they'd done in the middle of the night had just cost me a good night's rest. The next week started off as bad as the last one, and only got worse the longer it lasted. Apart from studying and project work, I was even asked to fill in for a sick coworker at my part-time job. Knowing how much I needed the money, I agreed. But that also meant saying goodbye to all the free time I had this week. My evenings comprised of nothing more than getting home, preparing myself a quick meal, before I fell into bed, exhausted. What made things even worse were the damn neighbors who continued their ruckus. Multiple times during the week, I was woken up in the middle of the night by their damned footsteps. I thought about confronting them about it, but I was too exhausted to do anything. Instead, I tried my best to ignore them and go back to sleep. I don't know how long it had been since I'd been so excited for a weekend and to get some well-earned rest. When I woke up on Saturday, it was already noon, but for the first time in days, I didn't feel tired. After some breakfast at 1 in the afternoon, I took care of some well-overdue chores around the apartment before I went for a brief walk. I'd barely made it back home when my phone rang. I answered, and who else but Lizzy was on the other end. And of course, she wanted to go partying. As nicely as possible, I told her I didn't want to go out and get drunk this weekend, and instead wanted to have a quiet evening. At first, Lizzy didn't budge, but eventually she gave up on partying and suggested she come over for the evening. I opened my mouth to say no, but I gave in. Who was I kidding? Hanging out with Lizzy was always fun. It was not even an hour later that a bouncy Lizzy greeted me. "Well, Slowpoke, how are you?" "I'm alright," I said, laughing a little, and invited her in. "Look what I brought. Wine." With that, she triumphantly held out 2 bottles of wine for me to marvel at. I think I'll pass. Last weekend was terrible. "You're no fun," she said, pouting on her way to the living room. "Oh, wow, is that your project?" I joined her and nodded. "Yeah, but I'm not done yet. You know, since I like old photographs, I thought I'd make them into a collage. You know, put all those old memories into one big, giant view of a different time. That's so cool, Lori. It's way more interesting than mine. What did you do? Oh, just a sketch of Leo. A sketch of your cat? That's your entire project? She shrugged and went through the photographs on the collage. Hey, Lori, this one's pretty weird, she said after a while. Which one? I asked, but I was already sure I knew which one she was talking about. This creepy family here. Just look at them. The way they smile? It's just weird. It's so unnatural. Seriously, what's the matter with them? Looks like something out of a horror movie. Yeah, it's kind of odd. But it's because of that I... My voice trailed off as I stared at the photograph. Something was wrong. This time, I knew it. This time, it was more than just a little feeling. My eyes wandered over it, the row of people, the 4 little boys in the front and the elderly couple behind. Wait, was there always an elderly couple? Hey, stop spacing out. So, you want to watch this movie? Lizzy called out from the laptop. I hadn't even noticed her moving to the couch, much less talking to me. For a moment, I stared at the strange photograph again before I shook my head. Stupid thing. Lizzy was right. It was creepy. With that, I settled down on the couch next to her, and we embarked on our adventure to find a movie to watch. It took us almost half an hour before we settled on an art house movie that Lizzy was dying to watch, and I was pretty sure I could suffer through. We'd barely finished the movie when I found myself drifting off. Hey, Lizzy? I'm sorry, but I think I'm gonna head to bed. It's alright, Lori. Don't worry about it. You okay here on the couch? There's a blanket over there and some pillows in case you... Man, it's fine. I'll figure it out. Just go to bed already. I gave her a sleepy smile and made my way to the bedroom. The moment I stretched out below the blanket, I felt myself drifting off to sleep. What woke me up were the strange sounds I'd heard before. The same quiet footsteps hurrying along somewhere nearby. This time, I got up. This time, I'd had enough. I'd barely thrown aside my blanket and hit the light switch when I heard something else. It was a muffled voice. No, a muffled, barely audible scream. It was Lizzy. I grabbed the first blunt object I could find, the night lamp, and rushed towards the bedroom door. Outside, the footsteps continued. But this time, they were accompanied by giggling laughter. The laughter of people, of children. What the hell was going on? The moment I burst through the door, the sounds had already stopped. All was quiet. Lizzy? I called out. Lizzy? Are you okay? Nothing. Quietly, my heart beating heavy in my chest, I made my way to the living room. In my mind, I could already see her on the couch, as scared and confused about the neighbor's weird sounds as I was. Lizzy? You alright? I tried again. When I stepped into the living room, though, there was no one there. All I could see was her blanket on the floor in the middle of the room. Lizzy? Where are you? I called out. But once more, I got no answer. In sheer confusion, my eyes wandered all over the room, trying to figure out where she'd gone. Lizzy, if this is a joke, it's not funny. Then I noticed something. Right there on the floor, in front of the collage, I saw a black and white photograph. I reached out with shaking hands, but even before I picked it up, I already knew which one it would be. I saw the same farmhouse, the same family, the same 4 boys in front, the same elderly couple in the back. But then, furthest to the left, I saw a young woman. She wore the same antiquated attire as the rest, but her face was entirely different. She wasn't smiling. No, she was screaming and looked utterly terrified. But even with that expression, even in black and white, and even in the old, grainy quality of the photograph, I recognized her instantly. It was Lizzy. Hey everybody. Hope you enjoyed today's first of 2 stories. I want to take a quick second to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. It really helps the channel grow and reach more new people. I was checking recently and saw that around half the people who watch the channel aren't yet subscribed, so I hope you'll take a quick second to hit that button if you haven't yet. Alright, now on to our next story. If there is one thing I hate in the summer, it's insects. I don't know why, but when it's hot, our small town is flooded by all sorts of creepy crawlies. It could be because of the various lakes nearby, or the fact that our town is nestled between thick forests. Every summer, things are bad, but this year's heat wave made it even worse. Flies and mosquitoes were swarming my house almost since the beginning of July. Every time I'd open a window, you could bet that a half dozen of them made their way inside. Don't even get me started on the spiders. Worst of all were the bees. I don't know where they all came from, but for a month now, they've been plaguing our town. During the first week, no one was worried about it. Most people guessed that the heat had sped up the breeding process, but soon enough, their numbers would thin out. Instead, more of them started appearing. It wasn't long before bee stings became a common occurrence when going outside. Stranger even was that a second, different type of bee appeared. They had bigger bodies that were a bit too long, and were much more aggressive than regular bees. At first, people thought they were hornets or wasps, but that wasn't the case. They were some kind of local mutation. Things got especially dangerous at the local nursing home and the kindergarten. The elderly and the little kids were too slow to notice the bees, and many of them got stung. Insect spray became as common as bread and water in our town, due to those aggressive bees. Even I got a can. 2 weeks ago, this epidemic claimed its first victim. It was a middle-aged woman who had gone out running. When her husband protested, she disregarded the warning and said she'd be fine. Her body was found on the same day. A local farmer found it in a ditch near a hiking trail early in the evening. No one knew what had happened. When the man approached the body, it was teeming with bees. Her face and arms were covered in bee stings, and almost swollen beyond recognition. When my friend Robert went missing, I was worried instantly. He was precisely the type who'd ignore the warnings and the danger. His girlfriend Sue called me Saturday morning. She'd not heard from him since Friday afternoon. This wasn't like him at all, she said. With all those bees around, God only knew what had happened. I tried to calm her down and told her he was most likely busy playing some new game. Once I hung up, I tried to call Robert. No one answered. I dropped him a message on WhatsApp and saw that he'd not been online since yesterday. That really wasn't like him. He was the type who was online constantly. I drove to his place right away. I rang the doorbell a few times, but got no answer. His neighbor soon called out to me and told me he'd not seen my friend all day. The last time he'd seen him was yesterday. I felt a lump in my throat. I asked the old man if he could keep a lookout and call me if he saw my friend come home. He was friendly enough and said he'd give me a call. Back at home, I had no idea what to do. I was about to call the cops, but what should I tell them? Robert had been out drinking with friends all night for all I knew. He'd probably drop me a WhatsApp message soon enough, asking what I was so worried about. 2 hours later, I got a call from his neighbor. The old man told me that Robert had finally come home. His clothes were dirty, and he looked scruffy and exhausted. Robert didn't even react when the old man called out to him. He'd just gone inside without saying a word. I was so glad to hear he was alright. I tried calling him, but again, I couldn't reach him. My messages stayed unread too. Shit. What if something had happened and he passed out? When I arrived, it took Robert a little while to answer the door, but he eventually opened it. He didn't say a word, just stood there, staring at me. Hey man, you alright? I was worried about you. He just kept staring at me. For a moment, he opened his mouth as if to say something, only to quickly close it again. Finally, he stepped aside and let me in. As I walked past him, I noticed how bad he smelled. Dude, what the hell did you do last night? You gotta take a shower or something. No reaction. Robert quietly closed the front door and went straight towards the living room. Something was off about the way he moved. He seemed to take a short pause before each step, as if to think about it. His feet shuffled over the floor and looked as if he was dragging his body forward. Why was he so exhausted? Dude, are you sure you're alright? I asked as I followed him. Instead of answering, he sat down on his couch and kept staring at me. I was about to call him out on his behavior when I heard the buzzing of bees. I couldn't say where it was coming from, and started scanning the room. I was sick and tired of the damn bees by now. I'd gotten so many bee stings that I killed them on sight. I couldn't see any, though. I suddenly felt a stinging pain on my arm, and noticed that one of the weird big bees had stung me. There was another one coming toward me. Where the hell were they coming from? It sat down on my arm, and for a moment, it seemed as if it was looking straight into my eyes. That was it. I got the can out from my backpack and started to spray it. I wasn't going to let that one sting me too. At that exact moment, Robert started to squeak. It was this weird, high-pitched sound, and in surprise, I turned toward him. He'd gotten up from his seat. Dude, what's... I broke off when he came tumbling toward me and crashed his body into mine with full force. What the fuck's going on with you? Calm down, man. His answer was more of that angry squeaking. He started to push me to the ground, and in that instant, I heard the buzzing of bees again. It was even louder this time, but I still couldn't see them. Where the hell was it coming from? Dude, stop. Enough with this, I said as I pushed him off me. Before I could get up, he came at me again. Why now? I'd had enough of this, and pushed him back hard with both hands. There was the sickening, wet sound of something breaking. Then Robert fell backward to the ground. Oh shit, man. Are you alright? I didn't mean to... There was that buzzing sound again. This time loud enough to drown out my voice. And this time, I knew where it was coming from. It was coming from inside my friend. I watched in horror as a swarm of bees burst from his open mouth and flew straight toward me. I screamed and started to spray them, but there were too many. There had to be dozens of them. They were all around me. I felt countless bee stings all over my arms and on the back of my neck. In my fury, I used the spray almost at random, spraying it everywhere. The air in Robert's small living room became heavy with insecticides in a matter of minutes. As I fought the bees, I saw Robert's body shake and tremble as if he was suffering from a stroke. He was squeaking again, and tried to run from the room, but instead crashed right against the wall. I saw more and more of the bees crawl from his collapsed body, only to die right on the spot. I tore myself from the sight and ran outside. I collapsed on the grass, coughing and swatting at the last bees that still stuck to my body. Soon, the police arrived. Robert's neighbor must have heard our fight and got worried. I told the cops what had happened, but they didn't believe me. While they interrogated me, an ambulance was called. And as they treated my many bee stings, one of the officers approached me. He was clearly disturbed by what he'd seen. He told me my friend was dead. When I started freaking out, he assured me it wasn't due to our fight or the insect spray. No, he said. My friend must have been dead for a while. This made no sense. I told the man again that my friend had come home only an hour or two ago. The man nodded, but the paramedics had said that Robert's body was in a state of advanced decay. There was no doubt that he'd been dead for almost a day. When I gave my testimony at the police station the next day, I learned more about the whole thing. The police officer opposite me frowned once I'd finished my story. He said he typically stayed quiet about these things, but what they found during the autopsy was just too weird. My friend's head, as well as his body, was covered in holes and tunnels. It almost looked like the honeycombs of a beehive. It was clear that Robert had died on Friday afternoon near the forest, the man said. The strange bees must have then started to convert his body into a hive. No one could explain how he made his way home, though. It is now a week later, but there's one thing I can't stop thinking about. What if it was those bees? What if they dug into his body to control him and to move their new hive here, right into the middle of our small town? Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.